Today we're going to have a look at the Ableton vocoder and just how versatile it is. This is going to be a tutorial showing you most of the ins and outs of vocoder and what it can achieve, but it's not just simply about vocoding vocals. There are other things you can do with the vocoder, so keep watching to find out more. So the first thing you might think about with vocoder is that kind of robotic sound. So let's try and make that now. I've got a simple vocal here and a piano track here at the top.
Because you are not there.
So it doesn't quite fit in terms of its chords, but that's the whole idea of vocoder, is that the vocal is basically using the chords to harmonize. Let's go in and drag a vocoder into the vocal track. So the vocoder is just an audio effect. So let's just hear what it sounds like with nothing set up. No carrier, no modulator, nothing. Right, so the way to make it sound robotic is to go into the selections under carrier, and by default it's using noise, so that's why it sounded really noisy at the beginning. Then we have modulator, which is vocoder on vocoder, and then there's pitch tracking, but what we're going to use is external because we want to use those piano chords. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a MIDI track, it can be a sample, it can be anything really that modulates the way those vocals are sound. So we're going to click external here, and this first track here is called Keyzone. So we're going to take the input from Keyzone Classic, which is just piano, and now let's take a listen to how it's going to sound just without changing or setting anything up. Okay, so just by listening to that, there's not much happening there. It's quite kind of very light, but there is something happening. If we just click on the solo button for the vocal, you can hear that there is something happening. And if you want to hear it more louder, we just increase that level, the volume level, and there you go. So it's going to be a little bit louder. We might remove that volume later. Let's just do that a little bit now. So let's play with the settings to make it sound even better. So as you can see there's 20 bands, right? So you can actually increase the amount of bands to 40, or you can bring them down to 4. So let's listen to the difference between 40 and 4. So this is 40. So 40 makes it more accurate because there's more bands across the frequency range. Now this is 4. So you can actually hear the piano going through because there are so few frequency ranges here. So it doesn't even sound vocal anymore. Now what we can do is we can actually make the bandwidth thinner. So let's just have a look with a range of 4. So what that means is those bars are going to be thinner in size, so they carry less of a frequency range within the bar. So let's just do that now. Unfortunately you can't actually see it in the graphic, but these bars are actually thinner in size. Let's bring that up to 40. So I normally don't mess with the bandwidth, I just normally keep that at its default 100. The other thing you can do is toggle between two types of filter behavior. So you've got one called precise and one called retro. So apparently retro, it makes it narrower and louder with higher frequencies, kind of like the old-fashioned sound. So let's, when I say old-fashioned, 70s and 80s vocoder. So let's go and take a listen. That's retro. So I'm hearing a little bit of difference, but I think you'll hear more of a difference once you start changing some of the other settings. The other thing you can do is change the start and end filter bandwidth. So this just sets the filter frequency to the highest and the lowest filter in the frequency bank. So let's just reduce the top end here. And we start the range a bit lower there. But once again, these are settings I don't really mess with too much. And then we have a gate setting. So that sets the threshold for the filter bank. So any bands above that level will be silent. So let's just set that right to the top and we'll move all the way down. Obviously nothing at the top. Just keep moving it down. So only a few of these filter frequencies are going to pop through. And that could be useful if you are just mixing the dry wet in and you just want a tiny bit of that robotic sound. You don't want too much. So I'm just filtering that through there. So it's not too intrusive or too robotic, just a little bit robotic. Okay, so let's just bring that gate back. So by the way, just to bring everything back to default, I'm just double clicking on the setting. And let's now listen to how things sound unvoiced. So unvoiced just basically sets the volume of the unvoiced noise generator. So let's increase that volume.
Because you are not there.
So it just makes it there's a bit more depth in the sound there.
Because now is not there.
They can sound a bit harsher. Then we have sensitivity. So that sets up the sensitivity on the unvoiced detection algorithm. So at 100%, the unvoiced noise generator is always on. So let's bring that on.
Because you are not there.
By the way, the dry wet has been lifted to 70-ish%. So if we just bring it back to its normal, let's bring that sensitivity all the way down so it's really a lot lower there. And the other thing that you have in this section is the unvoiced speed. So this adjusts between how quickly the vocoder toggles between the voiced and unvoiced detection. So let's go slow. And this is fast. Sometimes slower sounds a bit more subtle and a bit smoother. So the other thing you have here is control over depth. So depth knob basically controls the amount of the modulator's amplitude envelope and how much is applied to the signal. So at 0%, the envelope is discarded. 200%, only high peaks would be used. So let's go all the way up to 200%. So only those peaks are going through. And as you bring it down, you can see a more fuller frequency range there. But that's at the cost of actually understanding anything. So we just set that depth at its standard. So obviously attack is how quickly the vocoder responds to amplitude changes. So let's bring it really late like that. So this is like going to sound really delayed because the attack's slow. So with a bit of reverb, this can sound a little bit kind of distant and maybe robotic, but more sad robotic. So let's just bring that back to its default. And then Formant changes the frequency whether that's up or down, high or low. So it will just make it sound deeper or higher. Let's just take a listen. So depending on the sort of sound that you want, which is completely up to you, obviously, you can use the Formant. And then release is how fast the release band holds its amplitude. So if we go right to the bottom, it's going to be a very short release. So it's going to just basically be sounding robotic, but very quickly. So you can actually hear things a little bit better that way. And if you just bring that dry wet in, it's really clear. But if you have release going really long, you're going to have that vocoder signal playing much more. So they might even overlap in terms of its signal. Very interesting. So sometimes for me, sometimes the lower release is actually pretty cool. So that's most of what you see here. And the last thing I haven't shown you is these mono, stereo, left, right. So basically what happens here is a mono is where both the modulator and carrier are mono. It just affects the sound that you get. It will just obviously be a mono sound. Stereo is your default sound where basically you have a modulator that's in mono, but the carrier is in stereo. And left right is a stereo modulator, and then you have a stereo carrier. So everything is basically stereo here. So let's just take a listen to the difference between mono, left, right, and stereo. This is stereo. This is mono. And this is left, right. So basically, depending on the sound that you want, and basically just go with your ear here, you've got all of these choices, and the combination of those choices can give you the robotic vocoder sound that you're looking for. But say you're not looking for robotic sound, you want some noise sound, you want that noise signal in the background. Well, let's go. Basically, all of this section here is going to be the same, but just say we bring it back down to 4. You know, that's massive. So we just bring the level right down to its original. And we just default the unvoiced and the fast and slow. So something like this is more useful, say, on a drum. So let's just actually move this to a drum loop, which is this one here. So we're going to just listen to the drum loop without the vocoder, and then we're going to have the external noise carrier on the drum loop.
Because you are not there.
Take that vocal off. Now let's bring the noise in. So in some cases, this can actually enhance the sound of your rhythmic sound or your drum sounds. And once again, we can mess with bands. Oh, the other thing I haven't shown you is you can actually reduce the volume of any of these frequencies. So say, for example, you don't want any... So I've just reduced the volume there of the frequencies of the lower frequencies. So the vocoder is only vocoding right at the high end there. So that could be really useful. And then once you add Formant, you can really tweak your frequencies there. And once again, it's only the high end that's being affected. We can reduce them as well. Let's go stereo here, or even mono. So you really have a lot of control there, and it's not just for vocals. You can use it obviously for drums and other instruments. So let's go in and bring that vocoder. We're going to bring it back onto the vocal. We're going to solo that vocal again. Might as well keep that drum track on as well. And we're going to change the carrier now to modulator. So basically the way modulator works is it uses the modulator as the carrier. So the only way really to explain what this is to listen.
Because you
Let's bring this back to normal. Let's make some changes here to unvoiced. So it's basically modulating itself.
Because now is not there. Oh, because
Let's bring this to 4.
Because now is not there.
Change the range as well. Increase the format.
Because you are not there.
So sometimes something like the way modulator works with the vocoder, that is a really interesting way to just mangle the vocals or just bring a bit more of the high and less of the low, or the other way around, of course. You can use the vocoder almost as a multi-band frequency. So for example, we could just take all the highs out.
Because you are not there.
For example. And the last thing we're going to show you is the pitch tracking, which has its own settings, but it's mostly about basically the pitch settings here. Let's bring those bands right up to 40. And now let's change the high and low settings. Let's change the oscillator to square and increase the pitch. Okay, that doesn't sound great, so because we have the format too high and the depth too low, but we can just reduce that release. And now let's try again. Now let's increase the dry wet. And let's bring this pitch down to 5.
Because now is not there. Oh,
Retro, fast, unvoiced.
because you are not there.
So what you can do with this pitch tracking is you can use that pretty much for creating background harmony vocals. So it's not just about the robotic sound, but you can also use it for harmonics. And with enough tweaking around here, you can probably make it sound relatively natural. And the last thing I haven't shown you is this enhance button. So just enabling this button normalizes the spectrum and dynamics of the carrier. So it results pretty much in a brighter sound. So let's just use that.
Because
With
you
and without.
are not there.
You probably need your headphones on to hear the difference in this.
Because now is not there.
So that attack being slow, by the way, brings the vocal in a bit later. So it's kind of like this delayed effect. Let's bring the release all the way up. Let's bring the band right in the middle to about 20.
Because you are not there.
So just using the gate will cut off some of the frequencies. So in terms of making a harmonic sound, it'll sound more natural using the gate. Let's increase that level.
Because you are not there.
Excellent. I think that's it for my tutorial for Vocoder, and I want to just basically show you it's not just used for robotic vocals. It can be used for many use cases, and to be honest with you, I haven't really touched the tip of the iceberg here in terms of what this thing can do. It's a very small little audio effect, but it really packs a punch and it does a lot of big things. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Any questions, please shout out. I'd be very happy to help. Bye.